it's much, much easier to get our opinion, out there. You say, well, how great, for freedom of speech and all that. Yeah, I suppose. But the enormous shadow side is that every idiot in America and every mean-spirited person in America can do this with complete impunity and with almost effortless ease.
Welcome back to the Word on Fire show. I'm Brandon Vogt, the host and the senior publishing director at Word on Fire. What is the culture of contempt? What fuels it? And why are Catholics participating in it? How can we resist this contemptuous culture? Those questions and more are what we'll discuss today with the great Bishop Robert Barron, who joins us from our brand new production studio in Rochester. We've been working for months on getting this studio up and running, and today's the first time we get to record one of the Word on Fire shows there. So, Bishop, it's good to see you in this new place.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. It's a delight. It was a long time coming. Suddenly I moved here to Minnesota, and so we moved our studio equipment and the team from Santa Barbara here, and we had to, rent out this space and build it out as a studio. And I'm looking around it right now. It's mostly in the dark, but we have all these different places to film, the sermons and my commentaries, and we have some office space here, and we have some of my books are here, like a little library. So it's a delight, to be in it for the first time.
Some fun updates on a couple Word on Fire initiatives that we've recently led. One of them is a goal to pray 10,000 rosaries for people who have drifted away from the church throughout the month of May. And when we started this, Bishop, we thought 10,000 was kind of ambitious. That's like a lot of rosaries. But we hit that mark really quickly. I think within
a couple
days,
of days.
Yeah. And then latest count, I'm looking at it now, 62,000 rosaries now have been committed to this initiative. Talk about it.
Amazing. I remember it would have been maybe our provisional studio, and I was in there for something, and one of the guys said, oh, yeah, we have this initiative to have people pray 10,000 rosaries. Could you do a little piece on it? And that was the first, actually, I'd heard of that initiative, and I said, oh, wow, 10,000? That seems like an ambitious goal. But I did the little, piece. As you say, I think within 2 days, maybe 3 days, we met that goal. So then we said, let's do it 50,000. I remember thinking, oh, come on, 50,000. That seems really super ambitious. And we went beyond that. One of the best things about it, I'd urge people, go on the Word on Fire website, and you see a map of all the rosaries that have been prayed, and it's extraordinary. Many, many, of course, from our country and Canada and so on, but they're all over the world. Latin America, Africa, Asia, Oceania, all over the world. So it's very moving, yeah.
You could find that at the website wordonfire.org/May, because it was during the month of May that we were committing these rosaries. Another big accomplishment was the launch of your book on the Eucharist. It was titled, This Is My Body, A Call for Eucharistic Revival. This was part of the 3-year Eucharistic revival process. We did a Word on Fire show episode a couple episodes back about that. We had big ambitions for this one, too. We're hoping to get this into the hands of 1 million Catholics to help revive belief in the real presence. And what a start. What a start. Within the first handful of weeks here, we've already sold 500,000 copies of this book. How did you feel about that?
Well, wonderful. And same thing. I remember the first report I got was, well, we ordered 100,000 of this book for our warehouse. I remember thinking, oh, for Pete's sake, 100,000. I mean, was that a little ambitious in ordering? And of course, I think we sold 100,000. Was it day 1 or day 2 maybe? We sold 100,000. And then we sold 300 very quickly, at which point the warehouse was out. And so we had to pause and order more books. And yeah, as you say now, well over 500,000. So I think we're well on the way to selling 1 million of those. And that's what we wanted. Brandon, we're basically giving it away. We're selling it for $2, which is barely enough to, pay for the production and the shipping of it. So we're not doing this to make a lot of money. We're doing it to get this book into the hands of as many Catholics as possible. So I'm, super pleased about that.
I'll make sure to include a link in the show notes, but you can order your copy of the book at wordonfire.org/Eucharist. If you buy one copy, it's only $2, and you just pay the shipping and handling. But if you buy multiple copies, it's only $2 a copy with free shipping. So our goal is to get this into parishes, study groups, families, groups of friends, So buy 20 copies, 50 copies, 100 copies, and pass them out to all those you know and love.
Good.
All right. Today, we are going to be talking about the topic of yet another Word on Fire book, but a really interesting and timely one. It's by our good friend John Allen Jr. We'll talk about John in a minute here. But the book is titled Catholics and Contempt: How Catholic Media Fuel Today's Fights and What to Do About It. In this book, John talks about the culture of contempt, which is the lust to wound perceived opponents who are seen not just as wrong, but as evil. And this has become global in scope. It's fed by the rise of cheap speech, seismic shifts in digital technology, a boom industry based on selling outrage. All of that has led people to increasingly become unable to understand, much less dialogue with, their ideological rivals. But what's interesting to us is how this shift has infected the Catholic world as well. In the book, John talks about Catholic media, meaning legacy outlets, newspapers, blogs, websites, radio channels, etc., but also how it's infected each of us as individual Catholics, the way that we interact on social media, online, with friends and family. In this new book, he offers an analysis of this whole landscape and focuses on 6 particular case studies, 4 from around the globe, 2 in the United States, and then offers a sobering look on where Catholic media is headed. Bishop, I know you got to read a version of this in the manuscript form. Tell us a little bit first about John Allen Jr. You've known him for years. What should people who don't know anything about John know about him?
Yeah, John's a very good man. He's been involved in Catholic journalism for a long time, for many decades in different outlets. For a long time, he's been CNN's kind of chief Vatican correspondent. And during papal conclaves, that sort of thing, they call upon John. Many have referred to him as the best, commentator on Vatican affairs in the English-speaking world. He was based in Rome for a long time. Then he was back in our country for some years. Now he's back in Rome again. And he runs Crux, which is a Catholic news agency. We've been affiliated with John now for a number of years. He did that book with me, To Light a Fire on the Earth. So we've been friends for a long time, and I really admire him as a commentator on all things Catholic.
As you've often said, echoing Vatican II, the Catholic Church understands itself as an evangelizer of culture. We're supposed to be changing the culture and drawing it toward Christ. But in the last several years, especially during the digital revolution, the opposite dynamic seems to have occurred, especially in this realm of contemptuous dialogue. It's the culture that's evangelized much of the church. Why does it seem that Catholic media, whether traditional outlets or social media, falls prey to the same culture of contempt that we see in secular media?
Well, because it's ingredient in it to a degree. It's just going to be willy-nilly affected by it, but also because it sells. It's attractive to us in a perverse way. We love to watch a train wreck. And so even though the train wreck's a tragedy, we'll stop and look at it. If you're going through your Facebook feed and there's some kind of, scandalous thing, well, we tend to, look at it. Go all the way back to Augustine's Confessions when he marvels at the fact that we're drawn to, gladiatorial combats and even watching animals chase and kill each other, that there's a fascination with it. And it's unsavory, it's unhappy, but it's part of the human condition. What's happened now is it's become so available through this new means of communication, through social media. There's so many opportunities for us to tune in to something scandalous or, a contentious and, people are fighting. Let me get a look at that. So that's why I think we've been just drawn into it.
John begins this new book with a history lesson. He looks back to 1995. The UCLA scientist Eugene Volokh called cheap speech. He introduced the phrase cheap speech. He saw that with the advent of the internet, the cost of delivering and consuming information would plummet. You didn't have to pay a lot of money to transmit a message around the world. Anyone could now log on to their computer and spread their words. But is there a shadow side to this cheap speech?
Oh, extraordinary. And I've said that before, Brandon, but I'm old enough to remember, if you read something, let's say in a newspaper that you didn't like, and I'm going to write a letter to the editor. Well, you had to sit down at a typewriter, not a computer. It's easy. A typewriter, put a piece of paper in, type out your angry letter. You then had to find the address of the newspaper and the editor, and you had to fill that out, and you had to get a stamp, and you had to send the letter in, and then days would go by. The editor might get this letter, might open it, maybe, who knows, but might open it and read it and say, oh, come on, this person's crazy, and throw it out, right? The chance that you would get through the gamut of all of that was very low. Now, it's extremely cheap. All you got to do is a computer. You can type very easily. You don't have to worry about papers and typewriters and stamps and envelopes and addresses and the judgment of some editor. You can just put whatever you're saying immediately up, and it's 24/7 all over the world. So it's much, much easier to get our opinion, out there. You say, well, how great, for freedom of speech and all that. Yeah, I suppose. But the enormous shadow side is that every idiot in America and every mean-spirited person in America can do this with complete impunity and with almost effortless ease. That means there's going to be an exponentially greater number of these obnoxious and mean-spirited and painful postings. That's caused a huge amount of trouble, seems to me.
This culture of contempt is typically marked by anger, snark, derision, slander, a lust to wound your opponent. Why are these things so attractive to us, even as Catholics? We Catholics know these are all bad things. These are all immoral. They do damage to our soul. They don't lead to our flourishing. And yet, why are we drawn to participating in them?
Well, part is what I said before about we love to watch a train wreck, but I think part of it too, Brandon, and I felt this when I'm sometimes online and someone makes a comment about something I've said or a comment about me that's very mean. Look, these bodies of ours came up out of, eons of evolution, and we survived because our distant ancestors fought back and felt, the energy rise in them, and they got back at their opponent. Well, that's in us. That stuff is in us. And then I would say it's negatively affected by concupiscence and by the fall, etc. And so these feelings arise. Should you say, look, I just want to respond to this, what I think is a bad argument, and let me do it by making a better argument? Well, yeah, that's, of course, what we want. But you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. That's very deep in us, I think, as animals. And then as fallen animals, it's even more powerfully in us. That little adage, I learned it years ago in pastoral ministry, hurt people hurt people. And that's true. When you've been hurt on the internet, well, you want to hurt back. And so we have to be aware of that. That's the first step, aware of that, to take the deep breath and to say, okay, I understand. This is my animal nature rising. I know this is my fallen soul rebelling. Take a deep breath. What I should be about here is the truth, seeking to correct a bad argument, make a better argument. Do you know, someone, Brandon, you and I both admire that I always admire in this regard is William Lane Craig. Is Craig, someone will make a really bad argument, and sometimes with a lot of snark attached to it, or, an ad hominem quality. Craig has this ability, which I admire, is to kind of smile at that and then just make a better argument and, point out, okay, here's where this argument is really off kilter, and here's a better argument. That's a model of how to do it. My hero, of course, Thomas Aquinas, and you can even sense it, I think, in his writings. The objections that are raised in a Thomistic article, well, those are literary versions of what he would have heard in a lively public back and forth. And trust me, there would have been snark attached to those, and there would have been sarcasm, and there would have been, probably some ad hominem edge to them. There were powerful schools that were opposed to each other in the Middle Ages. But how Aquinas, in that Craig-like way, all right, there's your argument, I understand, and now let me answer it with a better argument. Watch that model of how to do it.
I think watching someone like Craig operate in that space, it's clear that when he responds to his opponents, he's not responding out of some wound. He doesn't feel like he's hurt, and so he's responding contemptuously to contempt. And I think for the rest of us, that's often when we're most tempted to fight fire with fire, contempt for contempt. When someone wounds us, that elicits this angrier reaction.
Yeah. And of course, to be fair, hurt people hurt people. It is true that and sometimes you really are wounded by words that somebody uses. And maybe at that point, the best thing is not to respond, is to wait until the sting of that wound has gone away and you can respond with greater objectivity. But I admit it's hard. And see, years ago when it was so difficult to get your point of view out there, right, I'm looking for the envelope and the stamp. And by the time I find all those things, maybe the pain has gone down. But now, I feel it right now. And so I'm going to respond. The sort of 10 or 15 second rule, like when you've written something, deep breath. Let's make it 30 seconds. Deep breath, and make sure you wait 30 seconds before you post that. And I've said this before, Brandon, the test would be, okay, is what I'm saying here an expression of love? Is it willing the good of the other? So let's go back to Craig for a second. If Craig says, all right, that was a bad argument, and I got a better argument for you, and I want you to know about that, okay. That's willing the good of the other. That's helping someone else understand the issue more clearly. Only when you can pass that test should you actually hit the button.
In the latter part of John Allen's book, Catholics and the Culture of Contempt, he himself offers several ways forward. I don't think he uses the word solutions because it's not necessarily a solvable problem, this culture of contempt, but ways forward for Catholics who want to escape this. So I wanted to talk through a few of these and get your thoughts. The first one he recommends is just not to respond, to ignore the culture of contempt altogether. In fact, specifically referring to Catholic websites, blogs, Twitter, Catholics who are online and participating in this, he says calling these people mean or un-Catholic has no discernible effect other than to make things worse. And pervious to both gentle reproof and harsh attack, they will, like cornered animals, snarl and bite back. Do you think he's right about that?
Yeah, for the most part. And he's talking there, I think, about, and the animal analogy gives it away, people that are kind of beyond reason. They're not trading in reason anymore. They're just trading in hurt and aggressive feelings. And they're right. It's like a snarling dog. You're not going to, come here, let me get this leash around your neck, No, you can't deal with people in that situation. So I think that's probably largely right. Those are people on the real kooky extremes of this conversation. It's best just not to engage them. I think that's wise, yeah.
He offers another recommendation similar to the pause and wait approach you just commended, which is to practice the ancient spiritual discipline of custody of the tongue. He says mostly this is giving oneself time before speaking, to think about the consequences before rushing to social media. But then he says, interestingly, if I was somehow made king of the world for a day, a terrifying idea, by the way, my lone edict would be that everyone has to take a month-long break from social media once a year so their psyches and their souls can detox. What do you think about that?
Super. Yes, I completely agree with that. And look, I'll confess, as someone who uses social media, my ministry depends upon it. I've gotten addicted to it the way everybody else has because the way these machines are built. But, we're doing that, Brandon, in the seminary setting, is we're demanding now this propedeutic year for our seminarians, meaning like a novitiate, kind of a year of spiritual formation before you begin your formal academic studies. And increasingly, it's true in my diocese, as part of the propedeutic year, it's turn in your phone, is plug out of social media. Once a week, you can check the phone or if there's an emergency, et cetera. So, okay, we're not saying we're living on a desert island, but basically hand your phone in for a year. And the language we use, which I think is really right, is detox, is to detox the brain and the heart from this kind of fetid world of social media. So I love John's suggestion there. So not just for seminarians, but for everybody. How about 1 month? Lent would be a great time, by the way. All right. But choose a month and say, I'm just, emergencies, and maybe once a day I'll check for important phone calls or something. But get off the darn thing. I think there's a lot of wisdom to that. And like to do it a month at a time, that's not bad because it can get things out of your system. And so many people have reported that they're just happier when they're not looking at the stupid machine.
That ties into his next recommendation, which is, look, if you consume this contemptuous media and it's making you angry, anxious, frustrated, contemptuous yourself, it's a signal you need to stop looking at it. And here's what he says. I'll read these few sentences. My advice, just don't look. Stop reading or watching content that's simply going to make you angry. It only encourages the manufacturers of such content. I guarantee you, nothing frustrates someone trying to provoke a reaction more than when that reaction doesn't come. Now, just don't look, he says, may feel passive and feckless, like you're actually part of the problem by choosing to ignore it. But in reality, tuning out is probably the simplest and most effective tool that ordinary people have at their disposal to register disapproval of the media culture of contempt. What do you think?
Yeah, largely right. Remember there's an old Simpsons episode where the advertising icons all come to life. So it's like all the giant billboards and these giant figures on the donut shop, they all come to life and they're threatening Springfield. And it's Lisa that figures out, look, don't look at them. That they're getting their power from that. We're looking and the fire is breaking out and buildings collapsing. And look, she goes, just ignore them. And so everyone ignores them. And then suddenly all these giant monsters just stop and then fall over. But that's the idea. They feed on attention. They feed on, retribution. It was Arthur Brooks, our good friend, who specializes in questions of what makes us happy, said that to me personally a long time ago, where he just said, just don't look. Just don't pay attention to it. And you'll discover, boy, that world just disappeared. This world that was preoccupying me, counting numbers and who's responding and what did that person say and did they respond to my response? All right, how about just say no, as Nancy Reagan said years ago about drugs, right? Just say no. I'm not going to get involved. Now, I realize whenever I say things like this, everyone writes to me and says, oh, but, there you are on social media. Okay, I get it. Social media is not demonic. It's not, terrible in itself. It's just got a dark side. And so it needs to be disciplined. Or better, we need to discipline our own use of it. So I think that the compromise, Brandon, is something like large parts of the day, get off of it. For an evening, for a month at a time. But then if I look at my phone and it's telling me 10 hours a day you're on social media, well, all right, reduce that. Just get that down to 30 minutes or something. So anyway, I think we got to be aware of how toxic, that's the right word, how toxic this has become. And just to a large degree, not all together, but to a large degree, stop using it.
I think the distinction John Allen makes in his book is not just between no social media or no internet and internet or social media. Yeah. It's within that space, distinguishing between the contemptuous media and players and those who aren't. And so John would say, look, you need to consume good news or good Catholic news. Go to those sites that aren't trafficking in contempt and ignore the ones that are.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. That's good advice.
All right, let's talk about one more proposal John Allen makes in order to swim against this tide of polarization, acrimony, tribalism. He suggests that we should carve out spaces where Catholics of differing outlooks and temperaments can meet one another and become friends, ideally in person, but also online. He calls it a Catholic Commons space. What do you think about that suggestion?
Yeah, it's good. And see, John and I are both old enough to remember before social media when we would get together at things like conferences. When people who are interested in Catholic thought would come together at an academic conference, and you'd meet people that you didn't agree with. But it wasn't this awful social media thing where you just became words hurled at each other. There actually was a person. Oh, there's that guy. Now, I didn't like his last book, but I can actually listen to him, listen to the talk he gives. I can ask a question. I can see him at lunch and engage him. There was something a lot healthier about that. And it as John suggests there, brought together people of differing, points of view. The trouble is that the social media world that was meant to bring us together often doesn't. It often obviates real communio, So if we could create that kind of space online, I think of our, Word on Fire Institute. We have courses, then people can come online and can dialogue with each other and so on. Those spaces tend, I don't know, I'm not saying about the Word on Fire one, but there's always the shadow side that they'll become corrupted by this, culture of contempt. But yeah, if we could pull it off, I think that would be a wonderful idea to bring Catholics together personally, face to face.
Well, it's time now for a question from one of our listeners. Today we have one from a priest, Father Bryce, from the Diocese of Houma-Thibodaux. He's asking about the transcendentals and wants Bishop Barron's feedback. Here's his question.
Hi, Bishop Barron. My name is Father Bryce Higginbotham from the Diocese of Houma-Thibodaux in Louisiana. When we were in college seminary, we were taught that there were 3 transcendentals of being: truth, goodness, and unity, and that perhaps beauty was a 4th transcendental. But when you teach, as do other scholars such as Peter Kreeft, y'all say that it's truth, goodness, and beauty, leaving out unity altogether. Could you explain what I'm missing? Thanks a bunch.
No, you're not missing anything. That is one of the standard ways to do it in the great tradition, that whenever you find being, you're going to find truth that appeals to the mind. You're going to find goodness that appeals to the will. You're going to find unity because you can't really analyze being unless you see it as one, right? If something is simply disparate, then it can't really become an object of the mind's analysis. This is in a way like the integritas that Aquinas notices in the beautiful. You have to have some sense of wholeness. Remember in James Joyce's Portrait of the Artist, when he used the example of the basket that's slung over the person's head, and he said, well, first you see it as a unit, as delineated, as one thing. Well, that's integritas, and that would be the unity that characterizes being in any of its manifestations. So yeah, you could say unity is one of the transcendentals. Probably your teachers notice that classically the good and the true get a lot more attention, and the beautiful is there in the great figures like Aquinas, but is somewhat more muted, or it's not as clearly focused upon. It's Balthasar, of course, who in the 20th century most brought to the fore the beautiful and felt that the good and the true had become kind of bullies toward the beautiful, if they had pushed the beautiful off the stage. So he inaugurates this sort of revival of that category. So, all 4 are transcendentals. We could just leave it at that and let the mind enjoy all 4 of those qualities.
Well, thanks for your question, Father Bryce. If you have a question for Bishop Barron, you can send it in to us at the website askbishopbarron.com. Before we wrap up, I want to encourage you to pick up your copy of the new book that we've been talking about here. It's by John Allen Jr. It's titled Catholics and Contempt. I think anybody involved with Catholic media, whether you're writing, podcasting on social media, if you're just an ordinary Catholic who's in this world, would benefit a lot from reading John Allen's observations and recommendations. Also, just a big announcement that we've launched the next volume of our Word on Fire Bible series. We'll be talking more about that on future episodes, but Volume 3 of the Word on Fire Bible, which covers the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, just launched, and you can get your copy today at the website wordonfire.org/Bible. Feels like that was a lot of books this episode, Bishop Barron. I think we talked about 4 or 5 books.
I'll tell you that Volume 3 is gorgeous, I must say, and I applaud the team, Brandon, your team that puts those together, because it is, I think of the 3 as the most beautiful.
Well, from your words to our listeners' ears. Again, you can learn more, see some samples, and get your copy at wordonfire.org/Bible. Well, thanks so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time on the Word on Fire show.
Hey everybody, it's Bishop Barron. I'm standing outside the now very familiar to me Paul VI Synod Hall, and I just dropped off the Relatio and the Modi. Now this is all technical synod talk. I was, as I told you, elected a relatore of our small language group, and that means I sort of take the notes, I monitor the conversation, then I have to write up this relatio. It's like a précis, like a report on what we said. And then they also offer these modi, or like amendments. And then we voted on those this morning, and I had to drop those off. Now tomorrow morning, I'm going to deliver this little report in front of the whole synod. So with the Pope there and everybody else. But it's now with the backing of our group, and I'm just representing this English language group. It's been very interesting. The small groups are actually a lot more fun and interesting in a way, because the synod hall, we're packed in there like sardines. It's very tight. Someone said today it's like a long flight on the middle seat in economy class, because you can't really move. You hear then speech after speech after speech, which is, can be interesting, but it wears on you. The small groups are a little more fun, and ours is remarkable, I must say. It's English speakers, but from all over the world. They're from, America and England and so on, but also from India, Pakistan, from Korea, from Iraq, from Sierra Leone, from Nigeria. So it's a very interesting, cross-section of the Catholic world. So it's been a fascinating process, and we're now through the first part of the Instrumentum Laboris. We now have 2 more parts to cover, and we'll go through the same process of discussion, report, amendments, etc. And that's how the work of the Synod unfolds. So it's, it's interesting. And I've now become familiar with that place in there with its own very distinctive culture. Anyway, keep praying for all of us involved in the Synod, and God bless you. As you can see behind me, I'm in the great city of Rome. I arrived yesterday. Today's my first full day in Rome. I'm here for the Synod of 2018 on the theme of youth, faith, and vocational discernment. I thought I would take the opportunity to tell you a little bit about this Synod, but also synods in general. What are they? They came up out of Vatican II. So just behind me there in St. Peter's, back in the early 1960s, bishops from all over the world gathered there to talk about the life of the church, and of course many changes came from it. Well, a lot of the fathers wanted to continue not having a council every 3 years, but something like a council. And so roughly speaking, every 3 years from 1965 until now, there's been a synod, which is a smaller gathering of bishops from around the world to look at a particular issue in the life of the church. So over the years, from Paul VI through John Paul II, Pope Benedict, etc., we've talked about a lot of things, from seminaries and priestly formation to bishops to the laity to women, etc. So for this synod, we're talking about young people and the outreach to young people. The word, synod is a Greek term. It just means really to walk together. So the idea is bishops coming together from around the world and then in unison trying to understand some issue in the life of the church more deeply. Its ultimate purpose is always to advise the Pope. So a synod does not have legislative authority. I mean, synods don't vote and then determine the teaching of the church. Rather, it's really in this elaborate way to give advice to the Pope. So typically what happens after a synod is the Pope will write a statement that sums up the findings of these discussions. Now, it goes on for quite a while. This is a whole month here in Rome. So tomorrow we start with a Mass, and that's October the 3rd. We end on October the 28th. So it's a full workout. And it's also an all-day affair. We start at 9 o'clock. We go till about 1 o'clock, and then the Roman system, you take a kind of break for lunch and a little siesta. And then about 4 o'clock, we resume and go till 7:15. And this is Monday through Saturday. So it's a pretty intense process. They give each synod father, so all those who participate are called synod fathers, they give each of us 4 minutes to make an intervention. But then that's followed up by what they call discussions in the circuli minores, the small circles or small discussion groups. So they will take place in the Paul VI audience hall in these little breakout sessions. And they're divided by language groups. So we have English and Spanish and Italian and French and German, I think. And many who've been involved in synods have said to me that's where the real action is. So we do indeed listen to all the speeches, but when we get together in the small groups and we kind of talk the issues through, that's where things really get interesting. I've talked to a lot of people who've been involved. This is my first synod, but they've said that the great thing is meeting people from around the world, from all over the church. They've come here now for this, and just hearing the different perspectives, meeting different people. The process itself, as I say, is a bit of a workout, and everyone says that. It's a bit of an effort, to sit through these lengthy days of speeches. But, it's something that's really healthy, I think, in the life of the church. I went over today to the Paul VI Hall, where the synod will be held, and I picked up my credentials, so we have a little, badge and so on. And it also gave us our seating assignments. So you don't just come into the synod hall and sit wherever you want. It's very carefully calibrated. So the cardinals and the top curial people sit right up in front near the Pope. Then you come back through the archbishops and the bishops. Well, then people like me, auxiliary bishops, we're way in the back of the hall. So it's actually a pretty small space. I mean, so there aren't any bad seats. Everyone can see and hear fine. But I'd be way up near the back of the hall. I'm looking forward to it. I think it will be a bit of a workout the whole month, but I think it'll be a very interesting experience at the same time. Also in our packet was a nice little booklet form of what they call the Instrumentum Laboris, Latin for, the instrument of work, or like the working document. And I had read it this past summer, and I've been rereading it since I got to Rome. It's the basis for our conversations. I think in some future videos, I'll talk more about the real substance of the Instrumentum Laboris, but that will be the substance of our discussion. We'll be commenting upon it, questioning it. It's a working document. It doesn't mean it's what we're going to say at the end of the synod, but it's a place to begin. I thought maybe I'd say just a few things about it in the course of this video. It's structured according to kind of a classic form, namely see, judge, and act. Now this goes back to St. Thomas Aquinas, but it comes up in the 20th century in the young Christian worker movement and the Catholic family movement, etc. The idea is simple, that a Christian should see, first of all, what's going on in your world. If you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're a homemaker, you're a teacher, see what's going on in your world. Secondly, judge in light of the gospel. How do you evaluate what you see? And then finally, on the basis of that judgment, act. So I think that's how the instrumentum is structured. The first section is all about seeing. What's going on now in the lives of young people? So the document is kind of front-loaded with a lot of anthropology and sociology and psychology, looking at the dynamics of young people's lives. There's a fair amount about social media, which I found kind of interesting, how that's affecting young people. But everything from globalization to family and to the breakdown in family relationships, and all these things are talked about. Then the second section, which is more the judging section, is how do you evaluate all this in light of the gospel? And actually this section I thought was quite rich in terms of its biblical references. It talks, for example, about Samuel and Eli. So Samuel, this young kid who hears the voice of the Lord but doesn't know what to do with it, doesn't know how to interpret it, until Eli comes along and helps him. Well, the document says that that's the role of a lot of elders and parents and mentors in the church, is to be Eli to a new generation of Samuels. Talked about the rich young man and cites John Paul II, who used the image of the rich young man in his great encyclical Veritatis Splendor. Talks about Solomon, who as a young man asked the Lord quite correctly, not for riches and fame and power, but asked for wisdom of heart. So I thought that was an interesting section. How do we evaluate, how do we judge our experience in light of the scriptures? And then finally, the last section is called choosing. It's about acting. Now, what vocational path do I find? So that's one of the motifs of the synod, youth, faith, and vocational discernment. So my life isn't about me, as I've said 1,000 times. My life is an adventure to discover what God desires for me. So the third part is all about how we choose and discern our vocations. Anyway, I'll say more about it as I go, but that's the structure of the instrumentum. And we'll be looking at it now as Synod Fathers for the next 4 weeks. We begin and end with prayer. So we begin with Mass tomorrow with the Pope. And that's just, in itself, it's a powerful thing. Whenever bishops of the world get together around the successor of Peter, it's a very powerful expression of the life of the church. So that's how we begin tomorrow. I'm eager to hear what the Pope says in his homily. Then tomorrow afternoon, we have a session. And it's largely, I think, the Pope again sort of laying out for us what he wants us to look at. Anyway, we're getting started. That's the work tomorrow. And what I hope to do now is give you updates as we go on what's going on, what we're talking about, and how we're coming to this important discernment in the life of the church.